Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Robert Richmond.
Good morning. No, that won't work. That will not work. In fact, everybody stand up, please. We're going to try this again. Except this time, I want you to think about it a little differently. We're starting the entire day here, and think about this from a perspective of anticipation. What's about to happen here? Imagine this could be an amazing day for you. Imagine whether it's me, Ken, anybody else speaking that's going to have an insight for you, a breakthrough, something that could change your business entirely, double it, triple it. Just get into that state of anticipation of what could happen today. And now I say to you, good morning. Good morning. All right, that's what I'm talking about. Go ahead and sit down. What we do with our team actually is every day, before we start our day, we get together and we thank each other for things that happened the day before, or congratulate people for things. I got a team of about 19 people. And we also, even before we start the day, get into a huddle like a sports team, and we do a cheer together. Now, I know that kind of sounds a little bit hokey, but we take that from like a sports perspective, that we want to play our best, that we want to have a great day. And we want to just make it an amazing day every time. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is somewhat of a revolutionary concept in culture. This whole revolutionary idea is the idea that it's possible to look forward to Monday mornings. That's the kind of culture that we've created at Zappos. So let me ask you before I start, just to know the audience, who here has heard of Zappos before coming in today? About half of you? Great. Just going to get started here on the slides. If you guys could start the slides, thank you. Apologize. So, who Zappos is? First, we've become known for being the #1 shoe store online. We've then expanded into clothes, housewares, accessories, and more. Just to give you the stats on what we're like as a business, we have about 10 million customers. That's on the active portion. We actually total in our database have about 24 million customers. Sometimes our call center takes up to 17,000 calls a day. Actually, during the holidays, it can go even higher. And before we really talk about what this culture is, what it means to be at Zappos, I want to just plant this idea into your head, which is that if you're here right now, it means you're a pretty intelligent person. You must be ahead of your industry to be here. But I just want you to entertain a notion. Entertain an idea that any business innovation starts out being counterintuitive. And let me give you an example of what that looks like. So, turn of the century, factory days. This is a time where people were cranking out widgets and they were driving slave labor. And this is a time when somebody just had a different idea. They said, you know what? I'm going to give our people breaks. I'm going to give them time off, maybe days off, go home, rest, relax. And that was seen back in the day as idiotic. I mean, what? You're paying your people to not work? And actually, short term, that was a bad move. Short term, that did create less widgets in the factory. But long term, what happened? They saw greater retention rates, less sick time, less injuries on the job, to the point where now it's so common sense that you're literally breaking the law if you don't give your people breaks. But back then, it started off as an idea that was completely counterintuitive. And so the seed of thought I want to plant in your head today is that some of the stuff that I'm going to show you today is in that counterintuitive kind of realm. I'll just give you one example right now. In a day and age where call centers have scripts and call limit times, we don't have any. In fact, our longest call on record is 8.5 hours for returning shoes. And yes, it makes no sense, right? I mean, can you think of a friend that you'd like to talk to for 8.5 hours? Like, I don't know anybody I'd even want to talk to for that long. But we're creating a different standard of what it means to be in service. We're going to get a little bit into that. But just to give you a few factors of the credibility here before we go into this. American Express just rated us in 2011 #1 in customer service according to their Customer Choice Awards. We also become the number 23, number 15, and number 6 best place to work, hovering around that top 10, top 15 area. We also were recently acquired by Amazon.com. And we've got revenue growth. That only goes to 2008, but heading into the billions right now for 2012. So we've got the traditional standard business metrics of success is what I'm trying to show you here. But what this doesn't show is what the culture's really like at Zappos. And rather than immediately telling you about what that is and how that works, I'm just going to give you a very brief experience through this video of what it's like to be there. This video premiered at one of our all-hands events. We actually take out theaters like this, although even bigger for our staff here. And we do quarterly updates that's filled with videos, with updates, live Q&A, a whole party afterward, that taking the time to celebrate and really be in communication with our staff. And this video was something that was written, produced, acted by, everything by our own team. And this gives you a feeling of what it's like to be there.
We're so glad you're here today. You may wonder what we do. Sit back, relax, and we'll tell you. We started up in '99, then grew larger over time. And to please and hope to be the best you'll ever find. We're Zappos family. Spreading cheer and beer. Customer service is what we do. Come check us out. We're more than just shoes. Clothing, housewares, handbags, beauty. You've been searching, no avail. Results have been an epic fail. It's alright, we've got your back. We'll put you right on track. So make your choices and have no fear. Just try them out, you have a whole year. Call in or email and live chat too. There's always somebody here for you.
These are the leaders of the company.
Yo, it's the Z to the A double POS. We put a smile on your face with a box on your doorstep. You deserve the best, so we flex the positivity. Good vibes all night, can you feel the energy? Throw your hands up if you really feel me. Reach up for the ceiling if you feel like a celebrity. It's gotta be insanity, the way we're dropping rapidly. Overnight smiles and stock till infinity.
We're Zappos family, we humbly say. Give us your worries, we'll zap them away. Deliver happiness and so much more.
Puppets from our ad campaign.
That's what we're here for. We said stuff, it may be true. There's a higher purpose too. We're all a part of something great to put a smile upon your face.
And that's Zappos. We get phrases like this coming in from people who take our tour. Everyone was so friendly. I've never walked into a place with so many happy people other than Disneyland. In fact, we got one recently that said they felt it was happier than Disneyland in a very genuine, authentic way. And this all started very organically. We just liked having fun and enjoying ourselves. And then we invited our vendors to come through and have meetings, and they said, whoa, 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 what's going on here? And they started to tour around. And then our vendors actually said, hey, can we bring our friends next time we come? We got to have them see this, to the point where in 2010 we had 3,500 people come through who are not vendors. And last year we had 15,000 people come through. And it's gotten to be so overwhelming, the number of people who want to see the culture and meet with us and hear about how we do HR and training and all those things, that my entree into this was to actually turn this into a business model, to figure out, wait a minute, we can't keep continuing this way because it's just having an impact on the business to spend so much time doing something that has nothing to do with our core business. But at the same time, there's a true business need here. Businesses are really realizing, wait a minute, as you guys, our culture is huge. How can we learn about this? So we've created a whole set of tours, trainings, keynotes like this in order to spread that message of how we do this, of how we create cultures where people love to work. And mind you, I'm not saying this from the perspective of how to create cultures like ours. I'm actually going to go into more of the fundamentals of how culture works itself as a strong culture based on what you want for your culture and how culture itself works, rather than taking our culture and making it work for you. While it seems like it's all fun and games and everything going on, what we do is we capture the culture every year in this, which is the culture book. So everybody writes a sentence to a page of what being at Zappos means to them. And before I came to Zappos, I actually read this book and turned to one entry, and after reading it, I said, I've just got to go here. It acts like a marketing piece almost for our own recruiting that way. And I read this piece by Abby. I'll just read a brief part of it to you quickly. She said she had an amazing year in 2007, all of these things going on, but the year had many ups, and the end of 2007 wasn't particularly the best for me. I lost my sister, who I'm very close to, and it's amazing what happens when tragedy strikes. My sister was my only family member in Las Vegas, but as my mother said, it's comforting to know that you still have family in Las Vegas. She was speaking of my Zappos family, the ones who never stopped calling, never stopped emailing, sent flowers and cards, gave hugs, and just plain listened to me. The support of Zappos as a whole was almost more overwhelming than the situation itself. That's family, and that's our culture. And the book, that thick, is filled with this. Thousands of people. So how did this all start? It's really building a brand based on an experience, because we've actually made a whole business model out of doing the seemingly impossible. Take yourself back to 1999, when people were hesitant to put their credit cards online for books, let alone something that's such a tactile experience, going in to try on shoes. They said, this is the worst idea ever. This is never, ever going to work. But we saw that it could because there was a market for mail order shoes. We actually did a test where the founders took pictures of shoes at a shoe store, put them online, sold it, went back down to the shoe store, bought the shoe, and then sent it out. That was our beta test. And so that it was provable that this works as a business. But what we realized, we had to really make it based on an experience. We had to make it so that, just like a shoe store, what's so great about a shoe store? You get your shoes immediately, for one, so we ship it as soon as possible the next day. You get to try on as many as you want, so we made it free to ship both ways, back and forth, and really, really easy to do so. So you can order a ton of shoes, but only have your credit card even hit for one of them. And then we started to realize, wait a minute, it's about that personal, emotional connection, as we call it. And this innovation actually came through a limitation. What we found is that these limitations, these frustrations, are actually golden opportunities. Because back in the day, in the 90s, to really make a name for yourself, what did you have to do? You had to advertise. There wasn't even really Google AdWords or anything back then. You had to take out these big Super Bowls for a .com direct-to-consumer play, and we just didn't even have the money for it. So we decided, wait a minute, what if we actually even cut our marketing budget? What if we make a bet? A bet based on our own values, that service is what's key, that it's the customer experience that's going to make this really work. So what if we invest all the money of marketing into the customer experience and depend on our own customers to be our marketing department and spread it through word of mouth and start talking about it? And that's what happened. That's how we built up the brand. Tony himself, the CEO, author of Delivering Happiness, I think he owns maybe 3 pairs of shoes. Because he says, we're actually a service company that happens to sell shoes, and now housewares and clothes and cookware and all kinds of different items that we now have on the site. In fact, he's further developed that into what you can see in the culture book. And by the way, if you go to culturebook.org, we'll send you one for free, not even shipping costs, just because we're interested in spreading this culture of happiness. And in that, and he's further discovered through the culture book, through these other processes, that it's not only just the service industry we're in, we're actually in the storytelling and memory-making business, because there are so many different stories about service. It's an entire brand based on that, to the point where we have stories and stories coming in from our call reps about things that they've done for the customer. Because what we do is we empower them. We empower them to do whatever they want on the call. There's no call limit times, no scripts. They're allowed to issue any kind of refund they want, anything to make the customer happy. Because what we realize is the percent of unhappy customers or where things are going wrong is so tiny. But the interesting thing is that the percent of customers who do have a bad experience, who are willing to tell the world about that bad experience, is humongous. Huge. And so what we decided to do is minimize that. Take that small percent of people who are unhappy, and even if they're wrong, we make them happy. Even through our training, we have a phrase, it's called, "It's not your money," because our employees are so protective of the culture that they say, this person obviously wore the shoes, they violated the policy, I'm not giving them their money back. And we say, whoa, it's not your money, this is what we do. Give them a one-time courtesy to say, this is our policy, but we're going to award you with it anyway. And maybe we'll do that again. We'll even do a one-time courtesy a few times just to protect ourselves against those detractors. And it's amazing what happens on these calls. One of the people on my team, because most of my team is coming from the call center, having direct experience with the service, one got calls from a customer who, we have a 365-day return policy. They can return it after a year. And one guy would return the shoe right before the end of that year period. And then he'd do it again. And we gave a couple one-time courtesies. And then the guy on my team, Elia, said, let me just ask you something. If you had a business and you had a return policy like this, and you had a customer that returned it on just the last day of warrant, how would you feel about that as a business owner? And it just started to make him think. And he said, look, I'm going to send you the shoes. Don't worry about that. I'm just asking you to consider it from this point of view. And he said, you're right. I understand. I'm not going to do that again. And it's this kind of relationships that our customers that are building story after story thousands of times a day. In fact, on our intranet, we have those stories listed, and they get updated daily. Incredible stories of how people are finding individual ways. We call it PEC, personal emotional connection, how they can find a direct connection, even if it's something as simple as hearing a dog barking in the background. Because when you think about it, what is business? It's all people. It's all connections. I would bet that most of your day is spent the same way my day is, in conversations, in emails, in writing, on phone calls. That's all we're doing all day is we're communicating. And what's communication? It's just two people in relationship. So this is our belief, that if we build relationships, we build the business. And it's this whole kind of shift away from a result metric-based focus. And don't get me wrong, people see the culture, they see us having fun, they say, boy, you guys must not track anything. But man, we track everything. We track everything. But that's the scoreboard. Imagine sports with a scoreboard there. But what happens if you're looking at the scoreboard half the game? You're not playing the game. The scoreboard's the results. But what is it that actually drives the results? You've got to take your eye off the scoreboard, off the metrics, let that keep score. But then it's on focusing on those behaviors that drive the results. And the behaviors are dictated by a mindset. So why not start at the source? Why keep focusing on those results and those metrics? Why start going into your employees focused on those results and saying, why haven't you got this, and let's get this result, and how do we get that? How is that going to work if they don't know the right behaviors? And how are they going to know the right behaviors on their own without you being there if they don't have the right mindset? And behind this whole idea of mindset is what we call culture. It is our biggest asset, to the point that we're willing to protect this even over our own customers. It's kind of that idea on the airplane. You pull down your mask first, secure it before you help the kids so that you're alive to take care of them. Same thing with our culture. When we have those all-hands meetings, we shut down the entire call center. Tens of thousands of calls coming in a day. They get a message saying, you know what, we're taking this time for us right now. We're celebrating. Please call back tomorrow. Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. That's a pretty important statement. I think that sums it all up pretty well. Because you can have a strategy, and by the way, how many times have we seen going into companies in the corporate world, well, they'll do one strategy and say that didn't work, and then they'll shift strategies and go to another. It becomes kind of a flavor of the month appeal of switching strategies. But the thing that didn't change was the culture. So what business owners who keep changing that strategy don't realize is that it's not the strategy that's not working. It's actually the culture. And what we've developed is a culture that is entirely service-based. So it's not just the customer service department. Every single person has to come in and take the customer service training. I was in a class with the COO himself. Our CEO had to do it. Everybody has to take the training, and everybody during the holiday season spends at least 10 hours, doesn't matter if it's the CEO to the customer service agent, at least 10 hours on the phones, all equal and all together. In fact, our CEO, Tony, his desk is a cubicle just like everybody else's, because it's one of our core values is to be humble. Another of our core values is to build relationships through open and honest communication. So rather than having an open door policy, we have a no door policy. You don't have to go into a door to find the CEO. He's right there. And the interesting counterintuitive notions that we're talking about here really go into play. Because you'd think, like, if you opened up your call center up to 8.5-hour calls, that everybody's going to do that. I'll tell you, when I went through training and I go on my calls, I try to get somebody on the phone just to talk a little more. It's really not easy. Most people just want to get off the phone, return their shoes or their clothes, and go. But everybody thinks, oh my God, if I open it up to huge call times, it's going to ruin my efficiency, it's going to kill productivity, it's going to affect all my costs, etc. All those things that we're trying to prepare against, rather than planning for the success based on our values. And so this whole culture, it would be one thing if he said, let's all help out as a CEO. It's another thing where you see him directly in the cubicle next to you, headset on, talking just like everybody else. That's a consistent culture. And there's a certain kind of DNA to it. And DNA is a great analogy here because it's both simple and complex. It goes on and on and on. 90% of it, we don't even know what it does in DNA. But it's a very simple code that just gets reorganized very elegantly. And so the DNA of culture, what's programming this as an organism, a culture, like the biological definition of a culture it's an environment to grow something. For us, that DNA is the core values, our core family values, as we like to call them. This is something that we created based on Tony actually having a very negative experience, because he sold his first company at the age of 25 to Microsoft for $265 million. And he started to build up the company. He couldn't really interview everybody himself after a while, and the culture started to shift. He started to realize it wasn't a place he didn't really like to work anymore. To the point where one day, he actually hit the snooze alarm 7 times before going into his own company and said, there is something wrong with this picture. I never want to live another day where I don't love going to work. And he said, I got to make sure I know the right people are coming in every single day that I can be around. People are the culture. But he also realized through his mistakes at Link Exchange that he wasn't able to scale the culture because he could do it when he interviewed every single one and said, yes, you're a culture fit, you're a culture fit. And he could get that feeling and do that. But he realized two things. One, gut feelings can be wrong. And two, he can't scale that. We're thousands of people now. He can't meet with everyone. So we actually needed a system, an elegant system, to make sure that we could scale the culture to have the kind of experience internally. Same way that we wanted an experience for our customers, we knew the only way to drive that and keep that sustainable is to create an experience for our own employees and for ourselves, for our team, that we loved every day. And the way to direct an experience clearly is through values. If you think about any value, it's what you want to experience. And so the values became a year-long process where he started to model people and ask people, who do you think really represents Zappos well? What do you like about them? How do they act? How do they behave? What are they like? Let's model our best people. And they started to put together a whole lot of words, hundreds of words of what that meant. Started to see themes, put those down into 30 themes. And then started to develop these key phrases, really working hard on this wordsmith to make sure that it captured the experience that we want to create. And with each of them, they have a structure where they start with a verb. They make it active. We didn't believe in having values that are just single-word, uninspiring nouns. We wanted to have phrases that really captured it with action verbs, the first being deliver wow through service. Deliver wow through service, because it's one thing to have good customer service. Good customer service is like my web server's not going down. That's good service, thank you, great. The server's not down, thank you. But wow means there's an added surprise there. I didn't expect it to go this far above and beyond. And it's interesting how these values kind of come about. Because back in the day when we were starting a shoe store online, did you know you can't just start a shoe store online? Because in order to work with these brands, you can't just go and say, I want to buy some shoes wholesale from Nike. They have to trust your brand. And we were the first online. They said, we don't know you. We're not going to just give you our shoes. They wouldn't even take our money. And so what we had to do was figure out in an industry where vendors are used to being catered, are used to having to go to the Nordstroms and department stores of the world and beg them for their business and treat them really well and take them out. We switched the model up. We said, what if we treat vendors like gold, the people that we are paying money, and we treat them as if they're paying us money? And we started to take them out. We started to have fun. We started to invite them to parties. And then going from the smallest shoe store, we became the biggest, but we didn't change that practice. To this day, we still pick up the checks for our vendors. We still take them out. We still spend over 6 figures every year on a party just for them to say thank you. Thank you for being the lifeblood of our business. We could not be anywhere where we are today without you. So through every aspect of the business, we're looking to wow. People on their birthdays inside, people on anniversaries, just little favors here and there. Imagine being in a culture where everyone has as their #1 value the idea of how can they wow you, how can they go above and beyond. Imagine every employee around you, everybody on your team, every manager operating from that psychology. Imagine what kind of environment you can create. #2 is embrace and drive change. So I think we all think we're great with change until what? It's a change we don't like. And then we're not so comfortable with change. So this is something very important, especially in the dot-com world. Everything's changing so quickly. And it's amazing with these things how often it comes up in conversation. How we build that into, it's not on the walls, it's actually in the conversation, because something will happen and somebody will say, they'll get down, oh, we can't do this, and somebody else will say, I know, that's really awful, but look, let's just embrace and drive change. And an interesting thing happens when you do that, because if we didn't have that core value, you know what would happen? It would become personal and political. Because I would go up to that person and I'd say, stop being so negative. Hey, like, why do you have a bad attitude? And then we would have this kind of personal interaction that would be like a personal clash of values. But since we're on the same page with the values, I'm not making it personal. I'm just invoking the memory of our training where we actually say an oath to the values. And all I'm just saying is, hey, that subcontext is, hey, remember we agreed to this thing. We agreed to this experience. Nothing about you. Like, let's just realign back on track. Oh, yeah, you're right. And we'll call each other out on these values. We'll use these values to stimulate ideas, run them through everything that we're doing. Creating fun and a little weirdness. You clearly saw that up there. That's our way of really saying, how do we create an environment where we embrace differences, where we take all kinds of different talents from everybody? That's what weirdness means, is just your uniqueness. Being adventurous, creative, and open-minded, that's happening all the time there. I could go into story after story. This is one of my favorites. I think it's really driving the whole show, is pursue growth and learning. We have full-time trainers. We have a full-time life coach. We have classes. We give free books out to the whole company. We are constantly investing in the learning of our organization. Why? Because things keep changing quickly. And how are we going to embrace and drive that change if we're not learning and growing? Building open and honest relationships with communication. Now, honesty is one thing. I can be honest with you and I can totally ruin your day easily, right? If I just pick out something that's I don't like or that's negative, I could be being honest. But what's the point of honesty? Our point is to build open and honest relationships. That's the purpose of it. And with communication. And so with each of these, I could go into story after story. In fact, with our training, we do. We invite people beyond the trainers to come in, and they will talk and say how one of these values changed their lives with tears in their eyes, saying stories about how it impacted their lives. Each person speaking from a core value. And this positive team and family spirit, all these, like I said, I do. We actually have a 2-day workshop where we go through the value creation process, talk about all these values. There is story after story about how this is driving the culture. But the basis of it, the way that this works, is something called loose constraints with high integrity. Loose constraints with high integrity. As you notice, we didn't define any behaviors that must be done for those core values. Oh, here is how you do the wow. Granted, we have ideas. In fact, we have a whole list of wow tools, hundreds of ways to wow customers that anybody can just pull from. We also have a lot of stories. Here's this amazing story of what happened when a woman called when she had a funeral for her husband and what we did to wow them and surprise her with flowers. So there are stories and there are tools, but it's a very loose constraint. But the high integrity part means that we hire and fire according to those values. We hire and fire according to the values. If you violate one of those values, you could be out there like that. Because we're slow to hire and quick to fire. Slow to hire and quick to fire. We think about it like a marriage. We are investing in these people. We want them to be there for life. Turnover costs can be up to 200% of a person's yearly salary. So we take time to get to know them. We have an extensive application and interview process. And by the way, as part of sharing this with the world like we do for free on zapposinsights.com on our site, we just have that for free. You can just download our interview questions, how we do that hiring process, how we do the application. It's available to you for free. And we do that slowly. They come in, they take the tour. We see how they are on tour. We see how they interact. We see how they are with people on the individual teams. Because we're thinking about it like a marriage, like we want to be with them for life. So let's take the time to make sure that this is really a right fit. But if we didn't get it right, there's two things. One is we become known for paying our people to quit. Within that first month that they're here, okay, you got through that whole interview process, which 3% of people get through. But maybe you didn't quite know what it was like, and maybe you're not quite sure if you should be here. And they're coming in for $11 an hour. And we're saying, let's not make money the issue, because it would cost us way more to have you not perform well, to have you cause problems here. So we're going to give you $4,000 to quit. They're making $11 an hour. We're saying, here's $4,000. And you have to sign something saying you're not coming back, too, to say that this is a serious decision. The interesting thing we didn't realize, we did that to keep bad hires out. But here's the interesting thing that happened. We found that the greater help of that was all the people who stayed, because it suddenly made them realize the value that they were investing. Suddenly that $4,000 could be there. Wait a minute, I have to invest this. I got to make this worth it. And it really makes them question it and redouble their investment emotionally and say, you know what, this is worth it. And that impact has been huge, and that impact has literally cost us nothing. We've raised this amount through the years so that 2% take it. And sometimes it started at 1,000 and we keep raising it to make sure that that 2% that we couldn't quite figure out weren't quite full culture fits are tempted to take it. The real secret to a strong culture, and by the way, let me just tell you that the culture is not just one of fun, of family, but I saw on the screen you guys were talking about a culture of discipline. There's a great book, Good to Great, talks all about the culture of discipline. Fantastic book. It's been really inspirational to us at Zappos. But this whole idea of a culture of discipline is one we've actually put together with a culture of games. If you think about a game at its most basic core, it's not really about fun. A game is about 4 things. A game is about that there's a clear goal. There are clear rules. Think about this with any sports game. Clear goal, clear rules, a clear feedback mechanism to see how you're doing, like a way to keep score of yourself. Am I doing well? Am I not? And it's opt-in, meaning you decide to play a game. And what we did was we gamed a culture of discipline. So let's say for something, for example, you want to have the discipline of people being on time, keeping their word, being professional, all those things. If you have to constantly manage that and say, hey, come on, remember to be on time, it starts to get really fuzzy. It's not clear goal, it's not clear rules. Because sometimes it might be okay. You'll say, you know what? Oh, your dog was sick. Oh my God, I have a dog too. I get sick all the time, I understand. But if you don't have a dog, you might not be that sympathetic to that reason. And it starts to become personal and political. Instead, if you make it a game, it makes it something that people want to win. So what we do with our training, while we're having fun, while we're all enjoying ourselves, hearing amazing heartfelt stories, partying together, learning about the customer service stories, having a great time, at the same time, for 4 weeks, you have to show up at 7 a.m. every day, or you're cut. Clear rules. Clear goal to get into Zappos. Clear feedback mechanism, too, that you have to get 90% on the test or you're cut. And it's amazing when you set this as a standard, how few people get sick or have reasons or excuses when you just make this clear game. Goal, you want to get into Zappos. 4 weeks, show up 7 a.m. every day, not a minute short, or you're cut. It's not personal. We're just developing the skills of accountability, of discipline, by creating a very clear game. And now what that has created, through hearing all those stories, learning the values, creating a culture of discipline, it is an environment of such professionalism, despite all the shenanigans you saw in the video. It is a culture of such professionalism that we are a big, well-known brand, and any reporter can walk through the halls and talk to any person for a quote. They have no talking points. We have no PR department. New York Times can just go down the hall, pick somebody, and say, you're the one I want for a quote, because that's the level of professionalism that you're not quite seeing in that video that's built through that culture of discipline. So the secret to a strong culture, and by the way, if we have a little bit of time, we're going to go to a few questions and want to make this relevant to you, so if you have any, I'll ask you that in a moment. The secret to a strong culture, because remember, I'm not talking about you creating our culture. I'm not saying you have to have fun, you have to do videos, you have to enjoy yourself, though I highly recommend it. It creates a very fun environment every day. But the secret to a strong culture, what we mean by strong, is one where you're living your values. If you're saying this is valuable, this is what we value this service, we value all those things, but you're not living it, what that creates is a culture of inconsistency. And a culture of inconsistency is one where there's a lot of fear, because people don't know how to play the game. They don't know the rules. If there are rules, they're not well enforced. They don't know how to win the game. But instead, if you keep it in alignment, this is how you create the strong culture. The beliefs, those values, the words you're using, the actions. If anybody can walk in there and say that, wow, across the organization, I feel this. And you can walk into Zappos, you can take one of our tours, you'll see people with mohawks, you'll see some in pajamas, you'll see people dressed up nicely like fashion couture, totally different personalities. But those values are the same throughout them. We've made sure those values are the same. And it's interesting how you can feel it, because people know it within minutes of getting there. People are smiling. They're saying hi. They're actually saying how are you in a way that's very different from just that passing social exchange kind of how are you. And you can feel it. You can feel it immediately. I bet anybody walking into your company can within 5 minutes, maybe they won't have the words for your culture, but on a feeling level, on an emotional level, they'll know it. The same way people have emotions about a brand. You can say Apple, you can say Google. It inspires a certain kind of emotion. A brand is just the external side of culture, because they are both about what is the feeling you have about it. What are the beliefs you have about it? That's the relationship that you have to it. It really all starts with recruiting, because it's all about people. This is where we have people start. People come in and ask about our culture, and they say, oh God, what do I do? You're doing so many different things, and where do we start? Yes, culture is huge, it's everything. But if I could just say one thing about this, there's the line in the sand here, because what happens is if you have strong values, this is the test of if you really know you have some good values on your hands, is that it'll actually turn some people off. If you have values that everybody in the world can agree to, then it's not a very strong, unique culture, like a force to be reckoned with. When you're that force to be reckoned with, when you're saying this is what we stand for, and we're not accepting anything less, and certain people say that and say, whoa, 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 that's not for me. Maybe you guys are way, way, way too much about excellence, like like Apple. You know, their design standards. Somebody who's much more relaxed about those things would probably be in there and say, wow, you guys are way too intense for me. And that's fine. We don't want that relaxed environment, they would say. Some people see our really weird environment, and they say, whoa, 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 that's not for me. So if you can find that uniqueness to you, what is it that makes you different? Out of all those companies that are in your industry, why would somebody come to work for you rather than that exact same company somewhere else? What's going to make that so different? So we've got about 10 minutes left. I can go into a few leverage tools about culture, but what I like to do at this point is that since I don't know your industry, I don't know what you guys are thinking and feeling, if there's any question that you guys feel would be relevant to add value to your experience and what you want to learn about culture, are there any questions that anybody has? Wow, I got it all correct. Right. Perfect. So let me just give you, before I go, I've got about a little bit less than 10 minutes here. I'm going to give you a couple leverage tools. So the core structure of it, the DNA, is those core values and how you implement that across the organization, across training, recruiting, service, leadership, all those things. That takes years. It even took us a year just to create the core values. But there are certain things that you can do for leverage right now. The first off, it's kind of a recalibration with that alignment. And this is really, really simple. Because oftentimes what we'll do is we want things to get better as leaders. We'll just kind of organize our team together and say, all right, guys, what are your ideas? How can we improve the culture? What can we do? Yeah, let's do this. Let's do that. And you get all these ideas going. That's good and that works, but what's much more powerful is if you start with the negative. Because it's going on whether you know it or not. People are talking their smack, or they're feeling it and don't have the words for it, but they're not getting to express it. If you start off a conversation with your team, with your company, with your leadership group, and first start out with saying, what's not working? Let's start maybe internally with the team. What's not working? What you're asking with that question, the source of that question, is you're asking actually what's out of alignment. You're saying, where is it that we believe and want this one thing, but we're doing something else? So open that up. Get honest, get real, and say, what's not working? And then before getting into the new ideas, because we just went pretty negative, right? Saying all these things aren't working, kind of in a negative space. I actually have people like jump up and shake off that negative. Start in with what is working really well right now. Let's get not only that positive energy going, but when you have that conversation, You suddenly know what your assets are. You start to see, wait a minute, we're so strong at this, we're so strong at that, we have this partner, we have this client, boom. It's like you just threw out on the table like a whole set of tools, resources, weapons at your disposal that you maybe weren't even totally thinking about consciously. And then you have the conversation about improving culture. Then you have the conversation about improving service. And I'll tell you, you go through those two steps first, what's not working, what is working, and then getting to ideas, man, you will notice not only an explosion of the ideas that'll come through for that, but also a whole lot more energy. Because remember, it's energy that's driving everything. I mean, imagine it. The way that we feel, things could be going totally well, but what happens if you didn't get any sleep for days on end? You weren't eating well. You could have things be going incredibly well with the business and you can't even enjoy it. But the opposite of that is if energy is really high and really strong, then even the bad days don't get to you. You're like, what? This? No way, I got this. That's why they train. That's why military trains so hard. That's why the best sports teams train so hard. So by the time they're at the actual big game that matters, it's not a big deal. They're not training up to it. It's almost like training down to it. So this is what happens. This is the point of a great day. This is the point of a fun culture. This is the point of saying good morning with energy in the morning, thanking people, saying we're going to have an awesome day to get that energy, because when challenges come up, you'll be like, this is no big deal. I got it. And your people will be like that too. And the interesting thing is that we meet with hundreds and hundreds of companies coming through. We even just went to Google's headquarters in Europe to help them create a call center environment there and create a culture around service there. And the interesting thing that I noticed, whether the company is doing really, really well or poorly or just getting started, they all tend to have a lack of celebration. It's fascinating to me. Doesn't matter if they're just at the top of their industry. Because us as business people, as very driven people, what do? We think about the goal. We think about what's next. We just keep on driving and driving and driving. And it's kind of the equivalent of being on a boat and you keep seeing the horizon, and the horizon never gets closer. You may have gone miles and miles and miles and accomplished so much. But from your point of view, it's like you haven't gone anywhere because you want so much more. And that's great, and that's our drive, and that's what makes us great business people. But I'm telling you, if you actually keep a list and start compiling the things that you've done, start compiling the things your team has done, keep that and take a moment, whether it be off-site, whether it just be at a meeting, whether it be you get a video or something that creates a form of it, it doesn't matter. You can even just do this with just a single PowerPoint slide. We did this with my team on January 20th. We said, let's just look at what we've created from January 1 to January 20th. And we were blown away by our own work because we were so focused on year-end goals that we didn't realize how much we accomplished. And we took that moment to celebrate. And that is the rehydration of culture. That is the re-energizing of it. When you take that time, doesn't matter if the company's doing well or not, but you just take that time to celebrate. I'm telling you, it will revolutionize your entire culture. Thank you all for your time.